just the politicians, or is it also other agencies that are causing the problem? Well, I just, in this segment for today's news, want to give recognition to Brian Belletic, former Marine, who's been giving some really good analysis about Ukraine, amongst other regions of the world. That's for the New Atlas, if you want to go and find him on YouTube. But one of the things that he's consistently pointed to when talking about Ukraine is the work of the RAND Corporation. And this particular document from 2019, Overextending and Unbalancing Russia, assessing the impact of cost-imposing options. And if we just have, this is only from the front cover, but essentially it's saying that this brief, the RAND brief, summarizes a report that comprehensively examines non-violent cost-imposing options that the United States and its allies could pursue across economic, political, and military areas to stress, overextend, and unbalance Russia's economy and armed forces and the regime's political standing at home and abroad. This is a plan to attack Russia, not in an overt military sense directly, but to attack Russia's identity and their government and their society and the military by using covert, semi-covert, and proxy means. And of course, what have they achieved? Well, a section in this report says very clearly that part of the measures should be providing lethal aid to Ukraine. And my goodness, how they have done that, because based on this advice, Ukraine has raised 3 armies, 2 of those armies already destroyed, the third presently being destroyed in the battle with Russia. But surprising that the RAND Corporation was advising this as a good policy, as a sensible policy for the US government. And if we follow on through, this is just another little excerpt from this document. We've got the ideological and informational cost-imposing measures. And if you read this section, what it actually is an attack on the whole structure of the Russian government and society. This is subversion, although the word subversion isn't used, but nevertheless, the RAND Corporation was using its influence as a think tank in order to give the US government in particular, these options in order to attack and undermine Russia. And look at the vile killing that this has unleashed. In the bottom left corner, you've got one of the RAND spokesmen introducing a recent meeting that they had where they were talking about the whole crisis in Ukraine and how it was going to continue for a very long time. But also, this caught my eye that they were working alongside the Polish Institute of International Affairs. And when I looked deeper into the Polish organization, I found that in addition to talking about the situation in Ukraine, they were also analysing what was going on inside UK politics. And here you can see on the right of your screen part of a bulletin report that says support for, quote, anti-establishment parties is rising in Britain. And if you actually get into this incredible document, what it actually starts to talk about is the fact that for politics in Britain to work properly, the major parties, the Labour and the Conservative Party, should get at least 80% of the vote. And if they did get this percentage, then democracy would be working properly in the UK. But because we have individuals and small parties now attempting to challenge the warmongering, for example, of the UK government, this Polish organisation is branding the smaller parties such as Reform, but also the Greens and the Muslim Voice as being anti-establishment. I found this an incredible piece of text because to me it shows hostile intent by Poland and the intent to interfere into UK politics. Charles, I'll just ask you to respond to that briefly, but these think tanks are immensely dangerous in the way that they're playing fast and loose with with the whole democracy, the government structure, the constitutions of nation states?
I think so. I mean, I think really they're leaping an enormous obstacle, a factual obstacle, which causes the degree to which people are engaged in the first place. When they talk about, you refer to the share of the vote. I mean, are they talking about all the people that are eligible to vote, or all the people that do actually vote? Because of course we've gone quite far beyond that now in this country, in that voter turnout is low, and we look at the result, the completely skewed result now that the Labour government returned, in that they took a share of the vote by head, by number, that was far, far smaller than, for example, Jeremy Corbyn took years ago. And yes, of course, they are by far and away the dominant entity in Parliament with over 400 seats. So, I mean, there are so many issues at stake. But yes, I mean, the line that they take, is absolutely sort of symptomatic of the well, I mean, I would say meddling, but I mean, everyone gets accused of meddling these days. But the interference, at least in terms of ideologically interfering with how our democracy should function. I mean, it's quite clear it doesn't function, but whether or not we need pointers from elsewhere and entities that sit outside of government is open to debate.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, just to follow through on this section, a little bit of a deeper look at RAND. We have, of course, RAND being a US-based think tank, but RAND Europe also exists with an office in UK. What caught my attention here is right at the bottom, you see that it's talking about carrying out work on behalf of public and private clients, foundations, and international organizations like the European Commission. So I'm going to suggest that if there's one thing this organization is not, and that is unbiased, it's clearly biased in who it's working for and the policies that it's putting out. This was a picture from one of their videos, just to give you an indication of the audience in what would look like a rather impressive formal address. But it appears that the audience are in some form of tin shed or hangar. The gentleman on the right is Polish military general who's been brought in to talk about the war in Ukraine. But if we have a look at what the RAND Corporation is up to, one of the things it's doing, of course, is sucking in young people to train them as its graduates, and no doubt to impart on those young people its views and values of the world. Here's some history about the Pardee RAND Graduate School. And it's saying that in the past 50 years, more than 500 alumni have graduated from Pardee RAND with the theoretical and applied skills that enable them to tackle hard issues around the globe. And if you look at the final sentence, it says, and perhaps most importantly, our alumni are making a difference and changing the world. Of course, it doesn't say how that change is actually taking place. But this also caught my eye because they've been working on how the Israeli Defense Force could actually deal with the fact it cannot bring sufficient men into the army in order to deal with the situations which Israel faces. And so what RAND was talking about was a particular system of conscription, which meant that the Israeli government could take the pick of young men, and those that it didn't choose could go on to do some role in civil society. And I just thought this was an amazing coincidence with the scheme that we had the Tory government putting forward just before we lost our illustrious Prime Minister. So I'll leave our audience to think about that. But this one also caught my eye, using social media data to nowcast migration around the globe. And when we got into the RAND article, it was using the phrase stocks of migrants, which I found extremely offensive. And as I've put on screen, by stocks of migrants, are they talking about livestock? I better just leave it there because I found that so horrific. But this was the last thing, which was that basically this was one of the articles. The Iran-Israel war is just getting started. And the label to this photo says the apparent remains of an Iranian missile lie in the desert near the southern city of Arad, Israel, April 24, 2024. And I just found this an incredible image, because if you look at the two figures at the bottom of the screen, they have see-through shadows, which you can see very clearly if you zoom in. But the individual who's walking away to the left has an extremely dark shadow, but you notice that that shadow cuts off where the object is, and there is no shadow on the object itself. My conclusion is that this is a fake photograph, but it's being put out by RAND as obviously truthful material. So a few questions to be asked there. Let's end by coming back to you, Charles, because